It's great to have so many join us today. So thank you ever so much. Today, we're going to be looking at improving service transitions for people experiencing multiple disadvantage, focusing specifically on prison release. And our webinar this morning forms part of the national evaluation for the National Lottery Community Funds Fulfilling Lives programme. I am Beth Collinson, so I'm the Learning and Impact Associate for the programme. And this morning we're joined by kind of colleagues from across the Fulfilling Lives programme and further afield as well. So it's great to have so many speakers with us. My colleague Jo, who's part of the national evaluation team with me, she's going to be presenting as well, but she'll also be kind of around to assist with questions and things coming in on the chat box. So if you see Jo responding to anything, that's who she is. So before I introduce our speakers, I'm just going to go through a couple of the technical aspects of the platform so everyone's comfortable with WebEx. So firstly, you'll note that all attendees were muted upon entry to the session, and that's just to make sure we've got good sound quality as we go through. So as we get to the Q&A, please do feel free to unmute yourselves so you can ask questions in person, or if you prefer that I ask something on your behalf, please do pop it in the chat box. That can be located at the lower right-hand side of your screen. So you'll have an option. It kind of looks like a speech bubble. You'll be able to find that and kind of engage in conversation. Today's webinar will be recorded and we'll make it available via our Fulfilling Lives Evaluation YouTube channel. So should you want to share it with anyone after the session, please do. I'll share the link for that later today. And I can see lots of people have started to do it already, which is great, but we'd love to know who you are and where you're from. So do introduce yourself in the chat box if you can. Looking at kind of the sign-ups and comments this morning, we've got loads of people joining us, people from outside the UK as well, all the way over in Australia. So a very warm welcome to you, and thank you for joining us for what is your evening. So my colleague Jo, who will start the session shortly, is going to provide some kind of context about the Fulfilling Lives programme more broadly and the recent work that we've done in relation to prison release. But this also coincides with the Stop the Prison Cycle campaign that the Fulfilling Lives programme are currently running. So a short video has been made to support the campaign, and this features the voices of 4 individuals who are part of the programme's National Expert Citizen Group. So unfortunately, due to them doing other amazing things, which they always are doing, they can't be with us today. But please do take the time to visit the website. They give examples of kind of how a person might come to face complex needs and how complex it can be to seek help. So each person tells their story in the hope that it will encourage people to see past their circumstance and think before making a judgment or forming an opinion. So to learn more about the campaign and watch the video, you can visit the Multiple Disadvantage Day website, and we'll provide a link to the chat in the chat box in a moment so you can access that. So the final thing, I guess, for me to say is that if you are active on Twitter, please do tweet about today's session. So our Twitter handle you can see on the slide now, that's FL Evaluation, and we encourage the use of the hashtag #SeeTheFullPicture. So that's linked to the wider programme and the campaign work as well. So it's a great way to kind of see what's been tweeted about recently. So hopefully now you can all see the agenda slide up. So I'd like to thank all the speakers for making today possible. It's great to have you with us today. So to start off the session, we'll hear from my colleague Jo Welford. She's going to give an overview of kind of the recent work that the National Evaluation has undertaken. We'll then be joined in the first half of the session by Christine Grover, Samir Iqbal and Earl Salter. They're all over in Birmingham and are going to be talking about the Lead Worker Peer Mentor Service and how this work has supported those on release from prison. Then after a short break, we're going to be joined by Sharon Starman and Lee Dale. They're over at the Voices Project in Stoke-on-Trent, and they're going to be presenting learning in relation to the prison release that they've done. And last but not least, we've got Robin Casey and Lauren Wethel from the Ministry of Justice. So Robin's going to be giving the presentation, and Lauren will join us for the Q&A as well. So as you can see, we've got 2 Q&A sessions. So during those, please, do just engage with conversation. So, with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jo. So just bear with me a moment whilst I hand her the presenting powers. So over to you, Jo, with no further ado.
Thanks, Beth. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
We're good. Yeah, great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for joining this webinar today, and many thanks to Beth for the introduction. I'm Jo Welford. I'm a Senior Research Manager at CFE Research, and we are evaluating the Fulfilling Lives programme alongside the University of Sheffield. I'm going to talk through our most recent piece of research as part of this evaluation, which is focused on prison release for people experiencing multiple disadvantage, obviously the theme of the webinar today. And we looked at what the challenges are for this transition from prison to the community, but also what has been learned about working with prison leavers with experience of multiple disadvantage to help give them the best chance of desistance on release. First of all, especially for the people we have in attendance today who might not have been to one of our webinars before, a bit of background to Fulfilling Lives. So the Fulfilling Lives programme supports people facing multiple forms of disadvantage. It aims to change individuals' lives for the better, but also change the systems of support around them to create lasting change for people experiencing multiple disadvantage, and to do so by involving beneficiaries throughout this process. The programme was funded by the National Lottery Community Fund in 12 areas of England for up to 8 years. We're now into year 7 of 8, so there's been loads of really good learning from the programme so far in understanding the needs of this group and how best to work with them. And to date, the programme has supported over 4,000 people affected by multiple forms of disadvantage. Now, the programme defines multiple disadvantage as experience of 2 or more of homelessness, substance misuse, offending, and mental ill health. And most people supported have experience of at least 3 of these, and around half of those 4,000 beneficiaries have experience of all 4. And on top of these, 4 beneficiaries are also affected by other forms of disadvantage, including domestic abuse, poverty, physical disability and ill health, literacy needs and a lack of qualifications, childhood trauma, etc. So we're really talking about people who, with the most chaotic lives, who may have been excluded from or not been engaged with support services previously. Now, the experience of prison for people experiencing multiple disadvantage is often this recurring series of short sentences, which create huge disruption to their lives and then have limited benefit in terms of rehabilitation. We know that resettlement support isn't offered to those serving shorter than 12-week sentences, and even for those who are inside for longer, that 12 weeks cannot be long enough for those with multiple needs to be effectively prepared for release. What we do know from evaluating the programme over 7 years is that prison experience is linked with worse outcomes for people supported by the programme. The data we collect shows that those who spend time in prison are more likely to have lower levels of engagement with support services and report worse levels of self-care, living skills, social networks and relationships after a year on the programme than those who don't spend time in prison over the same period. And those who spend time in prison are also less likely to move on to a positive destination, for example, leaving the programme because they no longer need support. I do just need to stress here that while we can see a link between experience of prison and worse outcomes, we can't say for sure that prison experience is the direct cause of this, but there is definitely an association between spending time in prison and doing less well in other areas of their lives. So a smooth prison release needs preparation, but often there's not enough time for this. Assessments and screening processes on entering prison should pick up any resettlement needs, such as having no fixed abode, or a health need or risk of exploitation, but these can be missed, either through the process not being done properly or the person entering prison not disclosing certain information if they're worried what that might mean to them whilst they are in prison. Obviously, if the needs are not identified early enough, support won't be put in place for when they are released. One of the first things we looked at was, what does a release day look like for people with multiple disadvantage? And Sharon and Lee are going to talk a little bit more about this later, as they did a good piece of research into this. But for anyone released from prison, there's usually a mandatory check-in with probation on release day. So for some prison leavers, that might be the only thing that they have to do on the day. However, for this group, people experiencing multiple disadvantage, there can be a much longer list of appointments that they need to make on that day. So on top of a mandatory probation visit, they have a housing need, they might need to attend local authority housing office, they have substance misuse need, they need to collect a script or attend a service. If they have no current access to benefits or funds, they'll need to make a universal credit application, which in non-COVID times involved a visit to welfare benefits service, and that's all on the day of release. Now imagine that the prison's not in the same city as these appointments, and the appointments are spread across different parts of the city, and you now have this really intimidating list of things to do and organise, getting around by public transport or walking, and a limited amount of time to make all the appointments, as places close at 5 o'clock. And if you don't know where you're going to be sleeping that night, it's all the more stressful. And we also know that a Friday release can be the worst, as many services are closed over the weekend. So if you do miss anything, there's an even longer wait. And we know that during COVID, offices haven't been doing face-to-face appointments in the same way, and some have been replaced by phone contact. So this avoids some of the travelling, but then you need a phone, a fully charged phone, you need credit, you need to have the right numbers. And we all know that being on hold or not being able to get through can be a different type of frustration, so can still lead to missed appointments. And this is obviously going to be stressful and not optimum for preventing reoffending. A lack of finances and a lack of positive support networks to go to on top of this means that there's a very real risk of returning to people and places associated with offending and other problematic behaviours, such as drug use. So in particular, accommodation was frequently described as the biggest challenge for people with multiple disadvantage on release from prison. So there might have been a referral to housing services prior to release, which will need the prison leaver to attend an appointment on that day, but that doesn't guarantee a bed for the evening. And we know from the wider evidence base that offenders with accommodation needs are more likely to reoffend. So this is a crucial area of support that's sometimes lacking. If people don't have suitable accommodation, they might be forced to rough sleep or stay with friends from before their sentence. Now, affordable and safe accommodation is hard to come by in some areas, we know that, and demand can outstrip supply. Offers of accommodation are therefore more likely to depend on what's available than the prison leaver's needs and preferences. In some cases, it can be unsuitable or even dangerous, and at the very least, expose people to negative behaviours that they need to avoid. And this is an area where women can have particular needs to avoid returning to a perpetrator of domestic violence or find suitable accommodation for them to stay with or see their children. And mixed-sex accommodation can also be unsafe. So I've got a quote here from someone who spent time in prison, summarises some of these points. They're now having accommodation needs, substance misuse issues, and the lack of positive support can lead to a very quick return to a high-risk environment. I won't read the quote, but I'll give you a minute just to read that. So there's lots of challenges around prison release from people with experience of multiple disadvantage. But what Fulfilling Lives Area has been able to do to improve this for the people they support? Again, for anyone who isn't familiar with the programme, Fulfilling Lives support workers, they're often called navigators, and they have much smaller caseloads than many other services, and so they are able to spend significant time with each client. They've been able to use this time to build contacts with in-prison staff so they can work together to get as much as possible in place for that prison leaver. They can ensure that scripts are lined up, make necessary appointments for release day, advocate for mental health or social care assessments, and register with GPs. Housing applications can be completed in advance, and support workers have liaised with hostel staff to hold places whilst people are in prison. Obviously, financial support is really crucial, and if a universal credit or other benefit application can't be done in advance, the things that you need to make that application, such as ID, getting a bank account set up and an email address, they can be done in advance, which can speed up the process on release day. I think basically the more applications, paperwork, assessments that can be completed in advance of release, the less pressure there is on the day itself. which makes sense. And staff did stress that people in prison are more likely to engage with support if release planning is carried out with them rather than for them. So working with people to co-produce support plans that invests them in the process from the start and make sure that plans are built around their own personal goals and priorities. And this final point here on the slide, supporting release day itself, it's been a really crucial part of providing effective support. And, workers felt that this was the most impactful thing that they could do to help. As I already outlined, it can be a really demanding day with lots to do. And if a support worker can meet them at the gate, they can, take them to appointments, make sure they attend, sit with them if there's any delays, offer emotional support, provide essentials, like a mobile phone, toiletries, food parcels, clothes, etc. And just, provide that positive support and encouragement that you're going to need on that day. And there's a lot of related elements to getting this support in place. Workers need to be skilled and experienced in a number of areas, but also there needs to be some flex in the system to allow them to put the best planning in place. Being able to visit people in prison and their in-prison workers before release is a really important part of effective preparation. Basically, anything that maintains consistency of support is helpful, as obviously this allows trusting relationships to be built, limits the interruption of support or, people having to start from scratch with a new support worker on release and tell that story again. Joined up working needs effective communication, and staff do find that this is best when done in person. So this might be a pre-release meeting in the prison between the support worker and the community, the prison resettlement worker and navigator, and then the probation officer as well, just to make sure that everything's prepared in advance of release. And perhaps more importantly, people know who is taking responsibility for different things, rather than this issue of, that's not my responsibility, or, and things fall through the gaps. But this face-to-face work has obviously been more difficult during the pandemic. Information sharing can be challenging when different organisations work on different systems. And there have been some examples of agencies of building in some flex to this. So providing shared access to client databases where they can, just to make that process a bit easier. Liaising in advance of release and being there on the day itself clearly takes a lot of time. And support staff, they told us that they basically had to block out a day of their diaries if they had a client being released on that day, and they were going to support them. So obviously this is only possible if you have small caseloads. The staff also told us that it was important to have realistic expectations about success. For people who spent large amounts of their life in and out of prison and have other needs to be addressed to support breaking this cycle, change won't happen overnight. The last 2 points I'm just going to cover in the next 2 slides. One thing that the Fulfilling Lives programme has benefited hugely from across all aspects of support offered is in recognising and valuing the importance of lived experience in the workforce. I'm not going to say a huge amount about this, as our next speakers are going to talk about what lived experience can bring to the resettlement process from a much stronger sort of frontline perspective than I can offer. But just to highlight that both staff with lived experience and peer mentors or other peer support, so people who've been in prison themselves, can be a really effective way of building positive, trusting relationships with prison leavers. My final point to make clear is the need for women-specific support. There's some great examples of women-specific support services that help prison leavers in a safe environment and have built relationships with those women's prisons so that there's that consistency of support between in-prison and community teams. Women's prisons tend to be in more rural locations, so that release day support is again crucial as there's longer distances to travel. And those with children and or experience of domestic violence or exploitation also need particular support. And so providing safe, gender-specific accommodation, at least on those sort of early weeks following release, and working closely with social care to rebuild relationships with children and other family members can really help make positive changes in their lives. And this is still a really challenging area to provide effective support. As I said at the start, those repeated short sentences make it difficult to put this type of support in place for release, and breaking away from negative networks and influences is crucial but really difficult to control from a support perspective. One main takeaway, I think, though, is that, for many, time in prison is a window of opportunity to put that support in place that can encourage positive choices and change that is needed to break the cycle. And without the support in place, there seems to be very little chance of preventing reoffending. It's also clear that for many people with experiencing multiple disadvantage, the support needs to be ongoing. It's not just supporting that release time. Prison life has routine and structure, and on release, this structure disappears, and a lack of things to do can be really difficult to deal with. For people who have been entrenched in this cycle of reoffending for a long time, that transition can involve rebuilding an identity, different to all they've ever known. Last thing from me, I think this quote from someone who has been supported through their release nicely illustrates this. Having that support in place gives people a chance of making a change, but also it isn't easy. Just let you read that and finish up. That's everything from me. Thank you very much. I can see that there's some things come in the chat box. Hopefully keep putting them in and we'll take some questions after the next presentation.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Jo. It was great to get an overview of the work that's been done and some of those key messages that hopefully kind of sets a really nice context for the rest of the session. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sharon and Lee, who are joining us from Stoke-on-Trent. So Sharon, I'm just going to make you the presenter and you'll be able to go through the slides from here. Thank you to everyone who are putting questions in the chat. Please do keep them coming. I'm keeping a note of those and we'll come back to you in the Q&A session once we've heard from Sharon and Lee. Do let me know, Sharon and Lee, if I can do anything to help from my end.
Can't see the slides, Beth.
I can't see slides.
Have you been able to see them for any of the session?
Yes, I've just been watching the last.
But not ours.
Just not ours.
I can't see them either, and I've been able to see them for the session.
They've disappeared completely.
It's
I'm still looking at the last slide. I can still see the last slide.
Same.
With me.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
It's working for me.
That's not our presentation.
No, that's the Birmingham one.
Okay.
The agenda.
I don't think it's me and Lee at this time, is it?
No.
Lee, you were on my screen, so I just looked at you and thought, I'm coming to Lee. I do apologise, everyone. I'm just too excited to get through the session.
Absolutely.
I was really happy then. I was like breathing a sigh of relief. Oh, it's not me yet. This is fantastic.
I want to listen to Birmingham, please.
Well, sorry, everyone. I'm just skipping ahead. It's a total lie. I am going to hand over to Christine, Earl and Samir instead. So, Christine, I'm making you the presenter.
Brilliant. Thank you. Let's all hope it goes a bit smoothly. So hello everyone, it was great to see you all today. Let me know if you can't hear me or if there is any problems with my video and so on. I'll try and do something about that. So we've all been asked to speak today about prison transitions through the lens and the lessons learned in the lead worker peer mentor service, but we're also going to speak a little bit about some of our continued work in this field. So I'll introduce us as a team first. So I'm Christine. I'm currently the team leader for peer mentor services at Shelter in Birmingham, but I was a former lead worker. I'm going to let Earl and Samir say hello themselves. So Earl.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me, Christine?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, good morning all. My name's Earl Salter and I used to work alongside Christine as a peer mentor with the lead worker peer mentor service, and I have now progressed on to work with Birmingham Solihull liaison and diversion team, primarily supporting prison leavers. And I'll hand over to Samir.
So, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
So, my name is Samir Iqbal from the Prison Liaison Service Liaison and Diversion Team, Birmingham Solihull Mental Health Trust, a former peer mentor for the lead worker peer mentor service on the liaison and diversion pathway. lived experience in the criminal justice system, really.
Thank you both. And as a really, really brief overview of what the Lead Worker Peer Mentor Service was and how it fits into Fulfilling Lives. So the Lead Worker Peer Mentor Service was a work stream within Birmingham Changing Futures Together, which was one of the
Christine,
Fulfilling Lives sites. Hi, Smee, you okay?
Your slide hasn't come. Yeah, sorry, your slide hasn't come up.
I'm still talking on this slide. Can you see it?
No, there's nothing on the screen.
You're trying to rush me through. I can see it. Is everyone else able to see the slide that's on the screen? Yeah. Okay.
No,
so the lead,
I've still got the Birmingham slide. Sorry.
yeah,
I have
that's
no
the one.
Oh, it's the one.
Right
Okay.
one. That's
Okay.
the one. Yeah. Thank you.
I can only see you, Christine.
Christine, I've got no slides. Neither
I
have
don't
I.
know,
Just
Joe or Beth, how do we?
Sorry.
Is there a trick
yeah,
on this
well,
platform we can
there's
use?
now a lot of people coming in saying their slides have disappeared. So, sorry everyone, I'm not sure what's happening there. I'm going
That's
to...
okay.
I think maybe they need to change their layout. Change the layout on the right-hand side. Might be they'll be able to see the slide.
Can I just...
Oh, they've come up now for me. I see it now.
It's come up now.
Yeah.
Christine, I think there's an issue when I change you to presenter for some reason. So are you just happy to give me a heads up and I'll go through them? It seems like people have got them back now.
Yeah, I'll just say next slide.
Thank you.
Take it from the okay, brilliant.
Brilliant, yeah.
So hopefully you can all see the slide now. And are not disappointed now it's come up on the screen. Something wonderful. So I was just kind of saying that the Lead Worker Peer Mentor Service was part of Birmingham Changing Futures Together and was a partnership between BVSC, who were our commissioners, Shelter, who took the lead in this service, Cypher Fireside, which is a local homeless drop-in service in Birmingham, and Birmingham Mind. So next slide, please. So what was the Lead Worker Peer Mentor Service? And I'm going to try and describe it quite briefly. So the Lead Worker Peer Mentor Service was set up specifically to support individuals who are experiencing multiple disadvantage. So at the time that the service was designed, that was defined as homelessness, substance misuse, mental health needs and offending. And each client needed to have 3 out of the 4 complex needs to be accepted onto our service. But we also worked with people who predominantly were kind of stuck in the cycle of multiple disadvantage and had been excluded from a lot of the other services in the area. So our challenge was to kind of develop new and creative and innovative ways to engage clients and support them effectively. So the service ran from January 2015 through to June 2019. And in total, we supported 323 clients through the duration of the project. All our support was flexible and that was client-led. So they decided, how often they wanted to see us, what they wanted to do in the support sessions. They could also make the decision to kind of drop out of the service and come back at any time that was beneficial for them. There was no time limit on the amount of time we could support clients, and we never excluded anyone. Predominantly, a lot of our work involved coordinating multi-agency bespoke support packages around the client based on what their aspirations were and what their identified needs were. So the model was that you paired a lead worker with a peer mentor, hence the name. We were very literal with that term there. So the lead worker is a professional who has extensive experience of working within support services, and peer mentor, which was a paid position, which I think is really important to mention, is an individual who has personally experienced multiple and complex needs and has reached a point of stability in their life. And the idea was that by pairing both, they would benefit from each other. So the lead worker would have a lot of knowledge about different services in the area that you might be able to refer clients to and understand what kind of level of support those services should be providing. And the peer mentor very much understood from a very personal perspective as a previous service user what barriers the client might experience and what to anticipate. And they were also able to use their lived experience to improve engagement with this client group. The next slide, please. you. So when thinking about the impact, particularly in terms of prison transitions, the biggest finding that came out of the service in terms of our cost-benefit analysis was the reduction in criminal convictions and offending behaviour in terms of our clients, which was equivalent to £2.1 million saved in public expenditure, which is a huge amount. So I've been trying to think of some really succinct themes of how we achieved that, which is quite difficult trawling through the evaluation, but I think I've narrowed it down to 2 reasons why I think we were able to achieve those outcomes. So firstly, I think the lead worker peer mentor service was really successful in providing a continuous thread of support for our clients. So a lot, if not all, of the services in Birmingham at the time would close support to a client the minute they went into prison, which left clients in the position where they'd kind of got used to certain support package in the community, had to get used to new services in prison, and then there was a whole new set of services introduced on release, which is a lot of change for someone to have to process in normally quite a short period of time. And humans, we struggle with change. So I think the lead worker peer mentor service, being able to support people in the community throughout their prison sentence and then again back into the community, was invaluable. And it provided a huge opportunity for change for the clients. So I personally found that it was one of the only, if the first, opportunities I'd had to kind of sit down with the client in a safe space without many distractions and really actually have a conversation about what their future plans are without all the chaos that you'd face in the community and on the streets. And the second reason I think we were so successful in terms of prison transitions and reducing criminal convictions was the safety net and support package we were able to provide clients prior to release. So there was millions of different interventions that we tried, and each lead worker and each peer mentor had a kind of different take in the support they provided. But some of the common support that we were able to give was firstly look at things like placements to go straight into rehab after prison if that's what a client really wanted. We were able to start referrals for really good quality accommodation while they were in prison. Sometimes we're able to ensure that the assessment for the accommodation took place in prison as well, so they knew what they were coming out to. We were requesting mental health assessments in prison if that was needed. We worked very closely with the probation services. So there were collaborative joint legal visits into the prison to see the client, to start discussing openly and honestly what the expectations were of probation and what was actually achievable and realistic for the client, to try and kind of flex that service to make it work. And we also did a lot of liaison with substance misuse services in prison and in the community, and again with healthcare services. And the hope was, and what we were aiming to achieve, was a smooth transition from the prison to the community. So clients knew exactly what they were coming out to and could anticipate that, which reduced some of their anxiety and I think contributed to some of their success. And a lot of the support we provided, and Joe's kind of spoke about this as well, was on the day of release and again continued in the community. So on the day of release, we would meet people at the gates. We would help them navigate all the many appointments they had on that day. And then the continuous support in the community helped really address some of the underlying causes of offending, which might be poor housing, undiagnosed mental health needs, substance use. And we also did a lot of advocating, particularly in terms of probation as well, to try and prevent unnecessary recalls where we could. So the second impact, and Earl and Samir are going to speak a lot more about this, so I'm going to be really brief. So Birmingham Changing Futures Together, one of their overarching aims was to initiate systems change. And I think the second point I'm going to make about peer mentors working within the criminal justice system was a really good example of the systems change we're able to achieve. So this was a partnership between Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Team Liaison and Diversion Service. and shelter. And the pilot involved 2 peer mentors working within the criminal justice system and mental health services, specifically with individuals who were experiencing multiple disadvantage. And those clients were identified by mental health practitioners based in court and custody. And the support the peer mentors provided were within the community predominantly, to try and divert individuals away from that repeat contact with the criminal justice system. And that pilot was heavily evaluated, really positive outcomes, so much so that it's a national model across all of the liaison and diversion teams. And again, I don't want to speak too much about that journey because I know Earl and Samir are going to discuss it. So with no further ado, on to you, Earl, and next slide, please.
Yeah, hello again. I'm Earl, and I am currently a support time and recovery worker for the liaison and diversion team. Can you hear me, Christine? Okay, cool.
I can hear you. I didn't know if you saw me nodding then, but yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I'm really here to give you my views on where I think the value of lived experience here is, and Samir will talk a little bit differently to what I'm going to bring to the table, hopefully. So the value of lived experience from my own point of view, just to put it out there, I've got 20, 30 years of lived experience of substance misuse in and out of prison, and everything that comes with that: homelessness, hostel living, street homelessness, and all of that. And thankfully, I was able to turn my life around roughly 10 years ago now. And how I was able to do that was through coming across people who had lived very similar life to myself, but were doing something different. And I found myself going into a detox, and then from there, to try and do something different, I was encouraged to get involved in voluntary work. And one of the options that was available at the time was the Fulfilling Lives, as we know in Birmingham Changing Futures. And I was involved with this from the inception, from when they were bidding to bring it to Birmingham. And we were successful to get it to Birmingham. Then I was involved initially with Experts by Experience and getting to travel around the country and see different Fulfilling Lives projects. And I don't know, started to get a little bit of self-worth, actually acknowledging that I've got something to offer, and that my lived experience can actually help not just myself but others. And so then I found myself employable, and I got employed and working alongside Christine and other lead workers and whatever. And my view on lived experience per se is, I feel very fortunate and blessed to have been part of the Birmingham Changing Futures, because it was an education for me and it was learning, because what I had as lived experience was really limited in one way, because I didn't necessarily know how to conduct myself professionally or have the relevant contacts with all the services that our service users may need. But I was able to interact with our service users by I'm just thinking of one particular lad it was his first time in custody, and he was really fearful of what would be happening within the prison setting and what have you. And I was able to explain to him the processes that he'll go through and the people that he may need to speak to for whatever it may be whilst he's in custody, and be able to put him a little bit at ease. So it weren't just the fact of, I can identify with you because I've been in prison. There was some tangible stuff that I was able to give him information about. Now he's in custody, how you actually navigate whilst you're in custody. And then I suppose the lived experience around substance misuse and what have you, because I come from my own recovery journey from substances, and I know a lot of people that work within the substance field in Birmingham, and rightly or wrongly, it can be quite hard for somebody coming out of custody to actually interact with the substance misuse services in Birmingham, just through the phone calls, the waits and what have you. And we was able to literally just go direct to the people we needed to speak to, because more often than not, we knew them personally. And I know that's not necessarily the right way to go about it. And within the system change aspects, that what we was trying to do at Changing Futures, we was able to go and sit down with the management of the services and actually let them know that it isn't actually working. And one of the things that we was able to change, I think Christine touched upon it a little bit, was when people were street homeless and they were having their prescriptions stopped because they'd missed appointments that they didn't even know they had. And we was able to actually challenge that successfully to the point where they created a homeless team where they would deal with those clientele differently. So I do believe that lived experience on its own does have its limitations, and because I've been employed now for a few years, how I get to interact with our service users today is completely different to how I did when I was first employed as a peer mentor, and where I was able to initially break down the barriers because the service users that we got to work with, just through how we was able to talk and interact with them, they knew that, yeah, we've experienced what you're experiencing at the moment. I may not feel the same, but I've definitely experienced some of the things. And rightly or wrongly, that does break down barriers, because there is walls up where when service users perceive us as professionals. Because I can remember being in that position myself. Well, what do you know? What do you know? But through working alongside lead workers, my whole attitude and my mindset changed, that no, they do know, and they actually probably know a lot more than I know, apart from my own lived experience. And then flip side of that, I know through working with the lead workers that they valued what I had to bring to the table as well, and how we could interact with the service users. So what do we get to do now? And I think this is really important. It is vital, because I now work for the liaison and diversion team, and primarily we work with males coming out of HMP Birmingham, and through all the stuff that was presented earlier, the complex needs, all of our service users are experiencing probably all of those. And initially, when we get to go into prison, so some of the lads, a good majority of the lads, are really quite surprised, because they know I've been here, how I speak to them and what have you. I've been in this prison, I've been in that cell that you're probably being locked up in, but I'm not there today. And it's that hope that, wow, you've actually changed your life, and how have you done that? And then we can start telling them a little bit about our journey and how we have done it, and primarily it's by accepting a little bit of help and support along the way. And what it is when they come out of the prison, and this is where the lived experience, I think, is really vital. Actually understanding that first day of release is just so important, as was mentioned earlier again, with so many appointments that prison leavers are expected to keep and what have you. I mean, we've lost count now of how many people actually say, I just would not have attended that appointment if you weren't here, if you never picked us up from the prison. And again, from my own experience, I can remember being in that position where you've got all the right intentions in the world, but as soon as that gate opens, that's all gone, because you may be sitting in reception with a group of other lads who actually are talking about where they're going to go and have a drink, or where they're going to go and buy drugs and whatever. And if they haven't got that support there waiting for them, it's just so easy to find yourself drifting off that way instead. And so we are able to support them with their probation appointments, make sure their prescriptions are sorted, take them to get their prescriptions, support them to attend all the necessary appointments, support them to attend accommodation, where a lot of times they have no idea where the accommodation actually is. They've got an address, but they may not know how to get there, and just actually getting there from the prison to that address, having to also attend several other appointments, is running the gauntlet in itself. Just so many obstacles to overcome. But we've also been able to challenge housing providers, because resettlement within prison, they do brilliant work, and they've just got so much work to do, and they do the best that they can do. And sometimes the accommodation that's been provided is just not suitable for the service user. And because we have got good relations with the probation and resettlement, we are actually able to actually say this isn't suitable and get things changed if needed. It isn't always the case, but we've had experience where that has been the case, and because we're able to support the service user, it does get sorted out. And I really, for myself, really enjoy the fact, and I'm just so thankful of the fact, and now with the liaison and diversion team, being able to draw upon the expertise and the knowledge of the practitioners who will work alongside, and with the lead worker peer mentor stuff, with Changing Futures, being able to draw upon the knowledge and the wisdom and expertise of the professionals I was working alongside there, because that then helps us best serve the service user. Because if all I'm able to do is really just talk to a service user about how it was on D-Wing in Winson Green, it isn't really helping, because we all know that. But what I do need to be able to do is actually let them know the change is possible, and then help support them to engage in the services that can help initiate that change and encourage them to continue. And I think with the lead worker peer mentor stuff, I think it was a real important that there was no time limit on it. And if you turn up for an appointment, brilliant. If you don't, it doesn't matter. We're still here. And I think the Fulfilling Lives, the Changing Futures project that I was part of has helped me become a person where I'm now able to use the skills that I've learned so far and my own lived experience in another organisation. Thankfully, Birmingham Style Mental Health Trust have actually took on this, and we're getting to help people that just wouldn't have been helped previously. But it's just so important that we acknowledge on both sides, and with Changing Futures and with L&D, I think that all I've experienced is the lived experience has been accepted and welcomed into the organisations, and we learn from each other. And just from a selfish point of view, I genuinely enjoy learning from seeing how other professionals and practitioners go about their work, so I can best serve the service users that we come across. I could talk forever, but I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to pass over to Samir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Samir Iqbal from the Prison Liaison Pathway, part of the Liaison and Diversion Service. I just want a bit of context. So I've got lived experience in the criminal justice system, previous substance misuse, mental health, gang affiliation, and so on, and my lifestyle was in and out of the criminal justice system for a few decades, since the age of 8 years of age. So that's a bit of context of where I've come from in my life story, in the sense of, yes, I've lived that life, and that was the way of life. So now my slide is more about, Earl spoke about the kind of working with individuals and the lived experience kind of element of engagement in individual and navigating through the service. And then the slides that were put on at the start of the webinar, I was actually looking at that, and it's like, yeah, we do this. So I'm not going to go over the context of what it is and stuff, because we actually do it as a service. I'm going to go more about the collaboration element of it, and how it all started for me, and how it's been for me being a part of the Liaison and Diversion Service. So I started with the Liaison and Diversion Service just over 4 years ago as a paid peer mentor. That was on an honorary contract, working for Shelter, but on an honorary contract with the Birmingham Liaison and Diversion Service. So it started off with myself and the peer mentor, working with individuals with multiple disadvantages that were underpinned with multiple vulnerabilities. And we worked with them individuals that were coming out of custody into the courts and into the community. But what we started to notice was that there was individuals going into the prison estate without any further support, because the way the Liaison and Diversion Service is set up at that time was that post-sentence, you don't work with them. We haven't been commissioned to do it like that. So we challenged that in case meetings, in working in collaboration with practitioners, and saying, look, there's a shortfall within the service spec, and it don't sit right with our conscience to not continue support for individuals especially when you met them in police custody and in court, where you try to build that relationship with them within that kind of environment. And it's really hard to get that kind of trust and rapport built straight away within that kind of environment, being in the cell and so on. But we broke them barriers by utilizing our lived experience. And then we started to go into the prison, started seeing people on legal visits, building them support plans for release, picking them up from the gate, getting them to all of their appointments and their release. And as it's been said earlier on, that kind of there's so many appointments on the day release, and coming from a lived experience perspective, if I was looking at that, I ain't doing any of them appointments straight away, back out, flat out, do what I need to do. So the kind of the co-production element of it was that we worked in collaboration with practitioners and service managers and commissioners to look at how we can bridge that gap, and then brought it to the attention of the local West Midland Commissioner from Health and Justice to say, look, what way is it that we can bridge this gap and create a pathway? And then they went a back way with it, and then the service manager at that time sat down, looked at the data around the prison releases and so on, and then the prison liaison project started. I got employed for the role, and I've been involved, a part of the service of the prison liaison pathway from the get-go, the kind of the data around it. So I've been actively involved from a co-production perspective, and I think we've been running for over 2.5 years now. And then the back end of the collaboration work, working alongside a clinical practitioner, utilizing my lived experience. So I moved on from being a peer mentor into working in the NHS. And what I'm talking about is system change, in the sense of, due to my criminal record and the long history of my record and my involvement in certain things within that lifestyle, it was not really easy to get employed in the NHS. And that was some of the barriers that we faced. And we overcome them by getting the commissioners involved and so on. So I got employed, working on part of Birmingham Solihull Mental Health Trust, directly employed. And then the development of the pathway since it started. So it started off with me and just another practitioner. And then by sharing positive case studies and the stuff of the work that we're doing and the data that we collated, the outcomes that we collated through that process, after about 12, 13 months of the journey, we're participating in criminal justice board meetings with the police and so on. We was given additional funding for another 2 lived experience workers by the Office of Police Crime Commissioners West Midlands, and hence where Earl come and got employed, and we've got a female peer mentor as well that's been employed with us. So at the moment there's 3 lived experience workers, a part of the team of 1 practitioner, and we've got a clinical lead that looks over the project as well. So, and we work collectively with the whole of the layers and the diversion service, and then the prison. So, and then the kind of the lived experience role within the NHS, I think, is quite unique for the NHS in the sense of specifically employing somebody with lived experience from a criminal justice background. And I think it's been an important system change from my perspective. So we work in collaboration with commissioners and so on. And I think the last kind of element to what I want to get to is the kind of the reconnect. I'm not sure if you're aware of the site. So it's about care after custody for individuals that are leaving the prison estate. And we sat in the evaluation of that stuff. So before it was embedded, we was already running as a service. So they came to us in Birmingham, wanted to see what we was doing. And so then we started feeding into their learning days. And due to that, us being part of that evaluation of the Reconnect care after custody site. So at the moment, there's 11 pilots that are running around the country. And we fed into the kind of lived experience / peer mentor kind of experience. And that should be embedded within the kind of Reconnect model for individuals to have that smooth transition into the community. And now it's been part of their going forward that they're going to be employing peer support workers within that model. And then you have to look at it from 2 different perspectives, because I'm not a peer mentor anymore. I've moved on to a different role. So there needs to be a kind of balance, so you can have lived experience individuals that got a little bit more responsibility and accountability within their role compared to what a peer support worker is or a peer mentor is, because their role is a development role, but at the same time they're there to learn, and at the same time they're sharing their expertise. So there's two different kind of elements to it. So that was the kind of reconnect side to it, and my whole purpose of me speaking today is a lot more about how we've kept the lead worker peer mentor ethos about co-production and system change. And I think what I've demonstrated and what I've spoke about today is definitely a contribution factor of system change and shaping policy. And the final bit that I want to finish on is like the individual with criminal justice backgrounds that are employed within these kind of roles, the barriers that they do face is around their vetting and so on. So I've been involved in some of that stuff with the MOJ and the Health and Justice National Team to how do we have that kind of fair process for individuals that are employed to do a job, to work with individuals with complex and multiple vulnerabilities, and to have that easy access to the prison system. So we've worked on some of that, and I think we work with individuals that are in the revolving door of reoffending with multiple vulnerabilities. So that's me with that. And I want to go on to the next slide and just give some people some kind of links that they could follow and get a bit of a more of an understanding and get more of a kind of insight on what's happening. So the lead worker peer mental evaluation, like what Christine was talking about, so you can link onto that, and it talks about the kind of cost analysis around how it benefited the local population or the criminal justice system, NHS, and so on. And then you've got the NHS layers and the diversion, peer support review, Pathfinder, where revolving doors, done an evaluation around if you invest so much amount of money into peer support and lived experience, you've got a likelihood of saving 1.2 million if you invested 600,000. So that was a kind of a positive kind of work that we've done with the layers and the diversion service as peer support or peer mental workers. And then again, the Reconnect program website, you can have a look at that and get an understanding of what it is and what they're what their vision is for going forward. So from, I think, next year, 2022, it's going to be rolled out probably in all of the prisons around the country to be embedded by 2025. So we've fed into some of that evaluation. And then the last bit is, and it's really important, from the work that myself and another former peer mentor have done, we've created an actual training module in podcast format for individuals or services. So it's tailored not just for services, but it's tailored for services as well. How can you successfully and look at critical points in how to recruit and retain staff within the criminal justice system and mental health services? So there's a series of 10 podcasts that you can access as well through these links. Hopefully the slides will get sent out. And I think keeping the ethos of the lead worker peer mentor service has been an important integral part for me to deliver and continue helping shape system policies from a national perspective. So I've been involved in a lot of different stuff around the country, around some of this stuff. And I started as a peer mentor and I moved on and so on. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Samir, Christine and Earl. It was totally fantastic. And as you can just see by the comments, you maybe haven't had time to go through them yet, but please do. Lots of amazing comments coming in and a really inspiring talk. So we've now got a few minutes for Q&A, and there's been lots of questions come in already, so that's where I'm going to start. So I'm going to invite Joe, Christine, Earl and Samir to kind of respond to any of these questions. So the first one, which was to yourself, Joe, is what do you define as suitable accommodation? What was that defined as in terms of the evaluation?
I think, we use the term suitable accommodation, but I think that would be very, if you were working in this area, I don't think there's sort of a line to draw between this is suitable and this is not. It's just got to be purely based on the individual and what they need. So for some people, it could be location specific. For some people, it's about, the size of the property, whether it's private or not, sort of understanding what the risk is for that individual and what then a suitable accommodation would be for them. And that would be, in an ideal situation, a process that's done with the individual and with the appropriate sort of housing association as well. So very much, yeah, on an individual basis.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question that came through from Baz, open to any of you. Baz asks, can the planning of release from prison be started from the start of the sentence, so during induction, to allow more time to be put necessary measures and needs in place sooner rather than later? Christine, Earl or Samira, I wondered if you could come in based on your experiences, if you've seen it happen.
Can I come in there? I think what's important for us when we started up this service, it was important to make contact as soon as they come into the prison estate, trying to build that relationship with individuals, making sure all of the support is in place, make sure we liaison with all of the services within the prison. I think it's an important factor for that individual to have that trust and rapport and that transition to be smoother, and then following through into the community. I don't know if anyone else wants to add on to that.
Yeah, completely agree. I think the longer you have to start preparing for that release, the better, and getting the interventions you need and the wraparound support around the client.
Definitely, thank you. Joe had another question as well, Joe Taylor. So they highlight information sharing as a particular challenge. So presumably more so in these experiences where safeguarding is in play. Do you have any examples of how organisations and partners have done this or sample information sharing agreements?
I can say that one example that we had from one of the Fulfilling Lives areas was in Blackpool, where they actually had a member of the probation team was seconded to Fulfilling Lives, and then vice versa for a short period as well, and that got round some of the data sharing issues of having that member of staff seconded to a different team, and they could access each other's databases much more easily. And yeah, that was sort of a really good example that seemed to work really well up there. So I don't know whether that might be an option in other places as well.
Well, thanks, Joe. The next question was from Kirsty. So Kirsty does work around Staffordshire with transgender prisons. Is there any trans prisoner support for release that people are aware of?
If I jump in, I don't know whether Christine might have anything to say about Birmingham, but from what we see, this is just a really under research and under sort of like people it just hasn't received that kind of attention to uncover some of these issues, which there clearly must be, massive issues, but is it still not discussed so much? And, where might these sort of more specific services start to grow now? I don't know whether you guys in Birmingham are aware of anything in particular.
I agree with you, Joe. It's not something that I can think of, and Earl and Samir might know another service that there is a service specifically to support individuals coming out of prison who are experiencing those difficulties. Earl and Samir, do you?
I think the only thing that I know is about the LGBT. I think we come in contact with limited. I think since I've been on the project for 2.5 years, I don't think I've come across any. So I don't know, but if I did come across something, I think first protocol would be probably LGBT to refer on to support, getting access to that support.
And again, that's not specific to prison releases, is it? So maybe that's something, Beth, for your next webinar.
Definitely. Well, there's loads of interesting stuff coming in. I'm like, we're not going to have time to cover it all. So we're going to have to do part 2 and 3. Another question from Sam. So in regards to Housing First, they continue support when people enter prison and relationships can continue and trust isn't damaged. They've struggled to be invited to any meetings and communications with prisoner with prisoner workers is poor during the person's sentence. Can you give any advice on how they could break down some of those barriers?
So Earl, Samir, I don't know if you want to. I mean, in terms of what I did during the lead worker peer mentor service, I just kind of hounded people, if I'm completely honest. I just phoned the prison over and over again, got the message there and said, I really want to meet you. That system might have improved a little bit more now.
So the Housing First within Birmingham.
Can you ask that quickly? Go on.
Yeah, because my partner actually works for Housing First, and I actually think they're actually quite good. if people end up finding themselves in custody and the support is continuing for them, and they will go and visit them in prison and actually try and make sure everything's in place to try and do something different when they get released and what have you. So I do believe that obviously dependent on the worker as well, but the Housing First in Birmingham, from my experiences, no, they continue the support even if they do find themselves back in custody for whatever reason.
I think the same what Earl just said. I think with the Housing First in Birmingham and knowing how they were running through shelter, they do continue to support in the prison. And I think the link with us. So yeah.
Sorry, it's Sam who asked the question. Yeah, I work for Housing First. The difficulty isn't from our side. We want to communicate with the prison workers. The issue is that we can't seem to get that communication from the prisons to us, because we want to, and we do continue to support people whilst they're in prison. The difficulty is that no matter how much badgering that we do, and we do that as well, Christy, you know, it's difficult, because I know that there's meetings that are happening, that there's multi-agency meetings that are happening within prisons for prisoners, because we want to provide as much support to that person who, you know, we're providing support to, but also to the process, to the system. We want to provide as much support as possible, so that person on release day has everything in place that they need, but we're just not getting those kind of invites or that communication back from the prisons, so that was the barrier.
So Sam, I'm just asking a question, what prison do you go into?
I mean, the main one, we've got some in Liverpool because it's Greater Manchester where we work, so we've got some in Liverpool and also Forest Bank, which is Salford in Greater Manchester.
Because a lot of thing for us and that with the kind of we're quite embedded within HMP Birmingham. We sit on reducing reoffending meetings on all of the other drug strategy meetings and all the other stuff that's going on in the prison. So we're quite embedded within the prison estate. So our Pacific, we're commissioned to work out of HMP Birmingham. And I think there are some of them barriers because of like, hence why I came onto it, because I used to find them same kind of barriers, and the only way we've come over is getting ourselves embedded in the prison. I think probably your protocol is probably the number one governor and probably ever to help you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Hopefully that answers your question, Sam. There's loads of interesting questions coming in, and I did promise you all a break, which I'm not going to remove. So I'm just going to say 5 minutes now. If you could come back by 15:15, I'll cipher through more questions in the meantime and make sure if we don't have time to answer these today, we follow you up as attendees to get them answered. So I'm going to give you a few minutes just to grab a drink, go to the toilet, whatever you need, and then we'll come back for the later half of the session, where we will be joined by Sharon and Lee.